The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and it changed everything. I was sitting in my home office, nursing a scotch and reviewing quarterly reports for Mitchell Tech Solutions when my phone buzzed. The sender was my 15-year-old son, Ben, supposedly asleep upstairs. "Dad, we need to talk. It's about Mom. I have proof." Greg Mitchell, successful CEO, devoted husband of 18 years, suddenly felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. I'd suspected something was off with Emma lately. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd started dressing up for her freelance writing meetings. But I'd pushed those thoughts away, telling myself I was being paranoid. I climbed the stairs to Ben's room, each step heavier than the last. He was sitting on his bed, laptop open, his face pale in the blue glow of the screen. "Dad, I'm really sorry, but I had to tell you." His voice cracked slightly. "I've been seeing things, and I finally got pictures." He turned the laptop toward me. The photos were crystal clear. Emma and my oldest friend, Jason Carter, head of sales at my own company, locked in a passionate embrace outside the Riverside Motel on Highway 9. Another showed them entering room 237 together. The timestamps showed they were taken last Thursday when Emma had told me she was meeting a client about a PR campaign. "There are more," Ben whispered, scrolling through at least a dozen photos spanning several weeks. "I followed them twice. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't want to believe it either." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. Jason Carter, my best friend since college, my business partner, the man who'd been best man at my wedding. The same Jason who came to our barbecues, who played golf with me every Saturday, who'd helped me build Mitchell Tech from nothing into a $15 million company. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "About a month. I wasn't sure at first, but then I saw them together at the coffee shop downtown, and the way they were looking at each other." Ben's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, what are we going to do?" I sat down beside him, my mind already working, calculating. 20 years of friendship, 18 years of marriage, all destroyed by two people I'd trusted more than anyone else in the world. "First, we're going to keep this between us," I said quietly. "Don't tell your mother we know anything. Can you send me copies of these photos?" Ben nodded, already typing. "Dad, I'm scared. Are you going to divorce Mom? What's going to happen to our family?" I put my arm around my son's shoulders. "I don't know yet, Ben, but I promise you this. I'm going to handle it. And when I'm done, they're both going to regret the day they decided to betray us." The photos arrived in my email within minutes. I saved them to an encrypted folder, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me like a nuclear reactor approaching meltdown. Emma was still awake when I went back downstairs, sitting on the couch in her silk pajamas, scrolling through her phone with a small smile playing at her lips. Probably texting Jason, I realized. The sight of her made my stomach turn. "Hey, honey," she said without looking up. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "Just reviewing some sales reports. Jason's numbers have been interesting lately." She looked up sharply at the mention of his name, then quickly looked away. "Oh? Good interesting or bad interesting?" "We'll see," I said, finishing my scotch. "I'm thinking of doing a comprehensive review of all our sales accounts. Really dig deep into everything." Emma's face went pale, but she tried to smile. "That sounds like a lot of work." "I don't mind hard work, Emma, especially when it comes to protecting what's mine." I went to bed that night lying next to my cheating wife, staring at the ceiling and planning. Emma thought she knew me, boring, predictable Greg who worked too much and trusted too easily. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan that would destroy both of them completely. The next morning, I arrived at Mitchell Tech at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. I needed time to think, to plan, and most importantly, to start gathering ammunition. My company occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in downtown Portland. I'd built it from nothing, starting in my garage 12 years ago with just me, a computer, and a vision for better business software solutions. Now we employed 43 people and had clients across New England. Jason Carter had been with me since year 2, when I'd hired him as my first salesperson. He was charismatic, smooth-talking, and undeniably good at his job. He was also apparently good at seducing married women, specifically my wife. I started with his computer access logs. As CEO, I had administrative privileges to everything in our system. What I found made me freeze. Jason had been accessing company files at odd hours, evenings and weekends when he should have been home with his own wife, Sophie. Cross-referencing with Emma's work meetings, the pattern was clear. He'd been using my office building as a convenient meeting spot before heading to their motel rendezvous. My assistant Maggie arrived at 8:15, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing her usual no-nonsense expression. Margaret Maggie O'Brien was 28, sharp as a razor and fiercely loyal. She'd been with me for 3 years and had an uncanny ability to anticipate what I needed before I asked for it. "You're here early," she observed, setting 1 coffee on my desk. "And you look like someone stole your dog." "Something like that," I said. "Maggie, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to ask absolutely no questions." She raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I'm listening." "I want you to schedule a comprehensive audit of all our sales accounts. Start with Jason's biggest clients. Tell him it's routine, but I want every contract, every expense report, every client interaction documented and reviewed." "Any particular reason we're starting with Jason?" "No questions, remember?" Maggie's expression didn't change, but I saw understanding flicker in her eyes. She was too smart not to put pieces together. "Consider it done. Anything else?" "Yes. I want you to review all building security footage from the past 2 months. Focus on evening and weekend access. Compile a report of who was here when they shouldn't have been." "How detailed do you want this report?" "Detailed enough to hang someone with." Maggie smiled, a cold, predatory expression that reminded me why I'd hired her. "This is going to be fun." Jason arrived at his usual time, 9:30 a.m., looking relaxed and confident. He knocked on my office door with his typical swagger. "Morning, Greg. Ready for another day of making money?" I looked up from my computer, studying his face. How had I never noticed how smug he looked? How entitled? "Morning, Jason. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Maggie's going to be conducting a routine audit of our sales accounts, starting with your portfolio." The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly. "An audit? Is there a problem?" "No problem at all. Just good business practice. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not," he said, but his voice was tight. "When does this start?" "Today. Maggie will need access to all your files, client communications, expense reports, the works." Jason nodded stiffly and left my office. Through the glass wall, I watched him hurry to his desk and immediately pick up his phone, calling Emma, no doubt, to warn her that their little secret might be in jeopardy. But they had no idea what was really coming. At lunch, I drove to the bank and made some adjustments to our joint accounts. Nothing illegal. I had every right to manage our finances. But Emma's credit cards were suddenly flagged for suspicious activity and would require my authorization for any purchases over $50. Then I visited our family lawyer, David Chen, an old friend who'd handled our business incorporation and estate planning. "Greg, good to see you. What brings you by?" "I need to understand my options, David. Hypothetically speaking, if Emma and I were to divorce, what would the settlement look like?" David's expression grew serious. "This is hypothetical?" "For now." He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "Well, given that you owned the business before marriage and it's been your primary income source, you'd likely retain controlling interest. The house would be split unless there are extenuating circumstances. Custody would depend on various factors." "What kind of extenuating circumstances?" "Adultery, for one. Maine is a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity can still impact asset division, especially if marital funds were used to support the affair." I smiled grimly. "That's very helpful information, David." "Greg, is everything okay at home?" "It will be," I said, standing to leave. "One way or another." That evening, Emma was unusually nervous. She kept checking her phone and jumping at every sound. When her credit card was declined at the grocery store, she called me in a panic. "Greg, there's something wrong with our accounts. My card isn't working." "Really? That's strange. Let me call the bank tomorrow and sort it out. Must be some kind of computer glitch." "But I need to buy groceries now." "Use cash," I suggested helpfully. "Or maybe ask one of your friends to help out." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Emma didn't have many close friends. She'd always been more focused on her appearance and social status than building genuine relationships. The few friends she did have were more like acquaintances, drawn to the lifestyle my success provided rather than to Emma herself. "I'll figure something out," she said finally. "I'm sure you will, honey. By the way, I'll be working late tonight. Big project." Another lie, but turnabout was fair play. I was actually going to follow Jason after work, see where he went, what he did. Knowledge was power, and I was building an arsenal. Jason left the office at 5:45 p.m., later than usual. He drove straight to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar on the outskirts of town. I parked across the street and watched through the grimy windows as he sat alone at the bar, drinking heavily and constantly checking his phone. At 7:30, Emma's car pulled into the parking lot. I felt a cold rage settle over me as I watched my wife of 18 years hurry into the bar to meet my best friend. They sat in a corner booth, heads close together, clearly agitated. Emma kept gesturing frantically while Jason tried to calm her down. I took out my phone and snapped several photos through the window. The lighting wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to identify both of them. After an hour, they left separately, Jason first, then Emma 10 minutes later. I followed Emma home, arriving just a few minutes after her. "How was your evening, honey?" I asked as she came through the door. "Fine," she said quickly. "Just ran some errands." "Funny. I tried calling you around 8. Your phone went straight to voicemail." "Oh, the battery stopped. I forgot to charge it." I nodded sympathetically. "Technology, right? So unreliable." Emma excused herself and went upstairs. I heard the shower running and knew she was washing off Jason's cologne, trying to eliminate any evidence of their meeting. But I already had all the evidence I needed. Now it was time to start applying pressure. The next morning brought the first crack in their facade. Maggie knocked on my office door at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a thick folder and wearing a satisfied expression. "Your audit results," she announced, setting the folder on my desk. "And Greg, you're going to love this." I opened the folder to find a comprehensive breakdown of Jason's activities over the past 6 months. Expense reports for client dinners that never happened. Mileage claims for trips to cities where we had no clients. Hotel receipts for conferences that didn't exist. "He's been stealing from us," I said, though I wasn't surprised. "About $15,000 over 6 months, Maggie confirmed. "Nothing huge, but definitely theft. And look at this." She showed me a series of emails between Jason and a competitor, discussing client lists and pricing strategies. Not quite corporate espionage, but definitely unethical and possibly illegal. "There's more," Maggie continued. "The security footage shows him bringing someone into the building after hours on 7 different occasions over the past 2 months. Always the same woman, always late evening." She handed me a printed screenshot from the security camera. Emma's face was clearly visible as Jason used his keycard to let her into the building. "They were using the conference room," Maggie said with disgust. "I found evidence. Coffee cups, takeout containers. They turned your company into their personal love nest." The rage that had been simmering inside me for days finally reached boiling point. They hadn't just betrayed me personally, they'd violated my business, the thing I'd worked hardest to build. "What do you want me to do with this?" Maggie asked. "Nothing yet, but make copies of everything and store them somewhere safe. We're going to need this later." At 10 a.m., I called an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in our main conference room, the same room where Jason and Emma had been conducting their affair. "I wanted to update everyone on some changes we're making," I announced, standing at the head of the table. Jason sat 3 seats away, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "We're implementing new security protocols and conducting comprehensive audits of all departments." I let my gaze rest on Jason for a moment longer than necessary. "We've discovered some irregularities that need to be addressed. Nothing major, but we want to make sure everyone understands that Mitchell Tech operates with complete transparency and integrity." Several people nodded approvingly. Jason shifted in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Additionally, we're reviewing all after-hours building access. Going forward, any employee who needs to work evenings or weekends must get prior approval from either myself or Maggie." Jason's face went pale. He knew exactly what I was talking about. After the meeting, I returned to my office and made a phone call that had been weighing on my mind. "Sophie, it's Greg Mitchell." "Greg, how nice to hear from you. How are Emma and Ben?" Sophie Carter was a sweet woman who deserved better than Jason. They'd been married for 16 years and had 2 daughters. She was also one of the biggest gossips in our social circle, a trait that was about to become very useful. "They're fine, thanks. Listen, Sophie, I was wondering if you could help me with something. I'm planning a surprise party for Emma's birthday next month, and I wanted to coordinate with Jason to make sure he doesn't accidentally spoil it." "Oh, how thoughtful. I'm sure he'd love to help." "The thing is, I've been trying to reach him, but he seems to be out a lot lately. Emma mentioned she's been seeing him around town at odd times. I hope everything's okay with you two." There was a pause. "What do you mean, seeing him around town?" "Oh, probably nothing. You know how Emma exaggerates. She mentioned seeing Jason at Murphy's Tavern the other night, but I told her that couldn't be right. Jason hates dive bars." Another pause, longer this time. "What night was this?" "Tuesday, I think? Around 8 o'clock? But like I said, Emma probably got confused. Maybe it was someone who looked like Jason." "Greg," Sophie's voice was tight now. "Jason told me he was working late Tuesday night. He didn't get home until almost 10. Oh, well then, Emma was definitely mistaken. Sorry to worry you, Sophie. You know how these things get blown out of proportion. But the seed was planted. Sophie Carter was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She'd start paying attention now, start asking questions. I hung up and immediately called our IT specialist, Mike Rodriguez. Mike, I need you to do something for me, and it needs to stay between us. Sure thing, Mr. Mitchell. What do you need? I want you to monitor all email and internet activity on Jason Carter's computer, everything he sends, receives, or searches for. Can you do that without him knowing? Absolutely. That's pretty standard monitoring software. Should I be looking for anything specific? Personal communications during work hours, anything that suggests he's conducting non-business activities on company time. Got it. I'll have a report for you by end of day. The rest of the morning passed slowly. I tried to focus on actual work, but my mind kept returning to the photos Ben had shown me, to the security footage of Emma and Jason entering my building, to 18 years of marriage dissolving into lies and betrayal. At lunch, I drove past the Riverside Motel. It was a seedy place on the edge of town, the kind of establishment that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a few long-haul truckers and what looked like a drug deal happening behind the dumpster. This was where my wife chose to destroy our marriage. This was where Jason Carter decided our friendship was worth less than a quick thrill. I pulled into the parking lot and walked to the office. The clerk was a thin man in his 60s with yellowed teeth and suspicious eyes. Help you? I'm a private investigator, I lied smoothly, showing him my business license. I'm working on a case involving adultery. I believe the subjects have been using room 237 regularly over the past few months. The clerk's expression didn't change. Don't know nothing about that. I pulled out my wallet and placed a $100 bill on the counter. I'm not asking you to testify in court. I just need to know if you recognize these people. I showed him printed photos of Emma and Jason from the company website. His eyes flicked to the money, then back to the photos. Yeah, I seen them. Come in maybe twice a week for the past couple months. Always pay cash, always leave together. What names do they use? Smith, always Smith. He laughed bitterly, like I never heard that one before. I left another $50 on the counter. If they come in again, I'd appreciate a phone call. He pocketed the money and nodded. You got it. Back at the office, Mike was waiting with a thick printout. Mr. Mitchell, you're going to want to see this. Jason's computer activity read like a roadmap of infidelity. Personal emails to Emma discussing meeting times and locations, internet searches for hotels and restaurants. Even worse, he'd been using company resources to research divorce lawyers and asset protection strategies. There's more, Mike said, flipping to another page. He's been forwarding confidential client information to his personal email account. Looks like he's building a portfolio to take with him if he leaves. The picture was becoming clear. Jason wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was planning to steal my clients and start his own company. Probably with Emma by his side, using my own money to fund their new life together. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated Greg Mitchell. At 4 p.m., I called Jason into my office. Close the door and have a seat, I said, not looking up from my computer. He sat down nervously, fidgeting with his tie. What's up, Greg? I've been reviewing the audit results, Jason. There are some discrepancies we need to discuss. Discrepancies? I turned my monitor so he could see the screen. It showed a detailed breakdown of his expense reports, with fraudulent entries highlighted in red. $15,000 in questionable expenses over 6 months. Dinners with clients who don't exist. Hotel stays for conferences that never happened. Mileage for trips to cities where we have no business. Jason's face went white. Greg, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let me show you something else. I opened another window showing the security footage of him and Emma entering the building. Bringing unauthorized personnel into the office after hours is a serious security violation, Jason, especially when that person happens to be my wife. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Here's what's going to happen, I continued calmly. You're going to resign, effective immediately. You're going to repay every penny you've stolen from this company, and you're going to disappear from my life forever. Greg, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been sleeping with my wife in my conference room? How you've been stealing from me while planning to take my clients and start your own company? How you've been lying to my face every day for months? Jason slumped in his chair, defeated. How long have you known? Long enough. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you want from me? I leaned back in my chair, studying him. This man had been my best friend for 20 years. He'd been in my wedding party, had held my son when Ben was a baby, had been a regular guest at family dinners and holiday celebrations. Now he looked like a stranger. Weak, pathetic, caught. "I want you gone, Jason. Out of my company, out of my life, out of my family's life. I want you to disappear so completely that in 6 months people will have trouble remembering your name." "And if I don't?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I release everything I have to the police, to your wife, to everyone in our industry. Theft, corporate espionage, fraud. I have enough evidence to destroy you completely. Your choice." Jason sat in silence for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I'll clean out my desk. Maggie will escort you out. You have 15 minutes. As he reached the door, I called after him. "Oh, and Jason, if you contact Emma again, if you so much as drive past my house, I'll make sure Sophie gets copies of every photo, every email, every piece of evidence I have. Understood?" He nodded without turning around and walked out of my office for the last time. Through my window, I watched him pack his personal items while Maggie stood nearby, making sure he didn't take anything that belonged to the company. Several employees gathered to watch, whispering among themselves. By tomorrow, everyone in our industry would know that Jason Carter had been fired from Mitchell Tech under mysterious circumstances. His reputation was finished. His marriage would probably follow when Sophie started putting pieces together. And Emma was about to discover that her lover was no longer the successful businessman she thought she was trading up for. The first phase of my revenge was complete, but I was just getting started. Emma's phone rang 17 times that evening. I counted each call, watching her face grow more desperate with every unanswered attempt to reach Jason. "Problems, honey?" I asked innocently, looking up from my laptop where I was pretending to work. "No, just trying to reach a client about a project. They're not picking up." "That's frustrating. Maybe try again tomorrow." She nodded absently and tried calling again. This time, the call went straight to voicemail. Jason had finally turned off his phone. I'd been home for 2 hours, acting completely normal, while Emma grew increasingly agitated. She'd tried texting, calling, even emailing from what she thought was a secret account. But Jason wasn't responding to anything, and she was starting to panic. What Emma didn't know was that Jason was currently at Murphy's Tavern, drowning his sorrows and trying to figure out how to explain to his wife that he'd lost his job. What she also didn't know was that Sophie Carter was already there, having followed him after his suspicious behavior that afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Sophie Carter. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Riverside Cafe." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Cafe early and chose a table in the back corner where we could talk privately. Sophie arrived exactly on time, looking haggard and angry. "Ugh, thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the opposite chair. "Of course, you sounded upset on the phone." Sophie opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "I found these in Jason's car last night." She spread several photographs across the table, pictures of Emma and Jason at various locations around town. Not the intimate photos Ben had taken, but clearly surveillance shots taken by someone following them. "Where did these come from?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago," Sophie said quietly. "I suspected something was wrong, especially after our phone conversation yesterday. Jason's been acting strange for months, staying out late, being secretive about his phone, making excuses." She pulled out another set of papers. Bank records showing cash withdrawals that match the dates in these photos. Hotel receipts, credit card charges at restaurants where he claimed to be having business dinners. I studied the evidence, impressed despite myself. Sophie had been thorough. "I confronted him last night," she continued. "He admitted everything, the affair, getting fired from your company, all of it. I'm sorry, Sophie. I didn't want you to find out this way. Did you know? When you called me yesterday, did you already know?" I met her eyes. "Yes, I found out a few days ago." "Why didn't you just tell me directly?" "Because I needed you to discover it yourself. If I'd just accused Jason without proof, you might not have believed me. This way, you have everything you need." Sophie nodded slowly. "He's destroyed our marriage, Greg. 16 years, 2 children, and he threw it all away for your wife." "What are you going to do?" "I'm filing for divorce this afternoon. My lawyer says I have grounds for an advantageous settlement given the adultery and financial deception." She gathered up the photos and documents. "But first, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man Jason Carter really is." After Sophie left, I drove to Ben's school and picked him up early, claiming a family emergency. We went to lunch at his favorite burger place, where he peppered me with questions about what was happening. "I fired Jason yesterday," I told him, "and Mrs. Carter found out about the affair." Ben's eyes widened. What about Mom? She doesn't know that I know yet, but she's starting to figure out that something's wrong. When are you going to tell her? Soon. But first, I want to make sure she understands the full consequences of what she's done. That afternoon, Emma's credit card was declined at 3 different stores. Her gym membership was canceled due to account irregularities. The insurance on her car lapsed when the automatic payment was rejected. By evening, she was frantic. Greg, something's seriously wrong with our accounts, she said, cornering me in the kitchen. I can't buy anything. I can't pay for anything. What's happening? I don't know, honey. Let me make some calls tomorrow and sort it out. Tomorrow. Greg, I need this fixed now. Banks are closed, Emma. There's nothing I can do tonight. She stared at me, and for the first time, I saw suspicion in her eyes. This is about Jason, isn't it? What about Jason? He got fired yesterday. He won't return my calls. Now our accounts are frozen. This isn't a coincidence. I set down my coffee and looked at her directly. You're right, Emma. It's not a coincidence. The color drained from her face. You know? I know everything. The affair, the lies, using my office building for your little rendezvous. I know about the motel, the secret meetings, all of it. Emma sank into a chair, her hands shaking. How long have you known? Does it matter? Greg, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you decided our marriage wasn't worth keeping? How you chose to betray me with my best friend? How you've been lying to my face every day for months? Tears started streaming down her face. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. Nothing just happens, Emma. You made a choice. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you came home and pretended to be a loving wife, those were all choices. What are you going to do? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where we'd raised our son, where we'd built what I thought was a happy life. I'm going to destroy both of you, I said quietly. Completely and thoroughly. Jason's already finished. No job, no reputation, and soon no wife. You're next. Greg, please think about Ben. I am thinking about Ben. I'm thinking about how his mother betrayed his father and destroyed his family. I'm thinking about how he's going to have to live with the shame of what you've done. Emma broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. But I felt no sympathy, no urge to comfort her. The woman I'd loved for 18 years was gone, replaced by this stranger who'd chosen lust over loyalty, excitement over commitment. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I have no money, no credit cards. That's not my problem anymore, Emma. You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with my best friend. I walked toward the stairs, then turned back. Oh, and Emma, pack a bag. I want you out of this house by tomorrow night. You can't just throw me out. This is my home, too. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only. We never got around to adding you to the deed. Legally, you're just a guest here, and I'm asking you to leave. I went upstairs, leaving Emma crying at the kitchen table. Ben was waiting in his room, having obviously heard the entire conversation. Is Mom really leaving? He asked. Yes. Are you okay with that? Ben thought for a moment, then nodded. She made her choice, right? Now she has to live with it. I was proud of my son's maturity, even as my heart broke for the innocence he was losing. The next morning, Emma was gone when I woke up. She'd packed 2 suitcases and left a note saying she was staying with her sister in Boston until we can work things out. But there would be no working things out. Emma had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. I called Maggie and asked her to come in early. I need you to make some phone calls, I told her. Emma's sister Jennifer, her friend Kim Walsh, her book club, her yoga instructor, anyone in her social circle. Let them know that Emma and I are separating due to her affair with Jason Carter. You want me to spread gossip? I want everyone to know the truth. Emma's going to try to spin this, make herself the victim. I want the real story out there first. Maggie smiled. Consider it done. By noon, Emma's phone was buzzing constantly with calls from friends and acquaintances who'd heard the news. By evening, her sister Jennifer called me directly. Greg, Emma is here crying her eyes out. She says you've frozen all her accounts and kicked her out of the house. That's correct. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? I mean, yes, she made a mistake, but... A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store, Jennifer. Having a months-long affair with my best friend and using my own office building as their love nest isn't a mistake. It's a betrayal. She's family, Greg. She needs help. Then you help her. She's not my responsibility anymore. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer to begin divorce proceedings. The papers were served to Emma 3 days later at her sister's house in Boston. Along with the divorce petition, I included copies of all the evidence I'd gathered: photos, security footage, expense reports, everything. Emma called me that night, hysterical. "Greg, please don't do this. We can work through this. I'll do anything." "It's too late, Emma. You made your choice when you decided Jason Carter was worth more than our marriage." "But the settlement, you're asking for full custody of Ben, the house, everything. You're leaving me with nothing." "You left yourself with nothing when you decided to cheat. Actions have consequences, Emma. You're about to learn that lesson." "This is cruel, Greg. This isn't like you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're right, Emma. The old Greg would have been hurt and confused. He would have tried to save the marriage, gone to counseling, blamed himself for not being a better husband, but that Greg passed away the night Ben showed me those photos. The new Greg doesn't forgive betrayal." Over the next week, Emma's world completely collapsed. Her few remaining friends stopped returning her calls once they learned the full story. Her freelance writing clients canceled their contracts after hearing rumors about her personal problems. Her gym, her book club, her yoga class, all the small social connections that had made up her life, disappeared one by one. Jason wasn't faring any better. Sophie had filed for divorce and was seeking full custody of their daughters. Word of his firing from Mitchell Tech had spread through our industry, making him essentially unemployable. The man who'd once been one of the most successful salesmen in Portland was now just another middle-aged failure drowning his sorrows at dive bars. But I wasn't done with either of them yet. 3 weeks after Emma moved out, I received a call that made me freeze. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Detective Sarah Wallace with Portland PD. We need to talk to you about Jason Carter." My first thought was that Jason had done something stupid, maybe tried to break into my house or office for revenge, but the reality was much worse. "Mr. Carter was found lifeless in his apartment this morning," Detective Wallace continued. "Apparent suicide. We're conducting routine interviews with people who knew him." I sat down heavily in my office chair, genuinely shocked. I'd wanted to destroy Jason professionally and personally, but I'd never wanted him gone. "When did this happen?" I asked. "Sometime last night. His landlord found him this morning when he went to collect overdue rent." I met Detective Wallace at the police station that afternoon. She was a tired-looking woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "How well did you know Mr. Carter?" she asked. "Very well. He was my best friend for 20 years and worked at my company for 10 years until recently." "Until recently? What happened?" I explained about discovering the expense account fraud and the security violations, leaving out the personal details about the affair. Detective Wallace took notes and nodded occasionally. "Was he depressed about losing his job?" "I assume so. He'd also been having marital problems." "Yes, we spoke to his wife. She mentioned that he'd been drinking heavily and talking about how his life was ruined." The detective asked a few more routine questions, then closed her notebook. "I don't think we'll need to speak with you again, Mr. Mitchell. This appears to be a straightforward case. Man loses job and wife, can't handle the pressure, takes the easy way out." Walking back to my car, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that Jason would never bother Emma or me again. Guilt that my revenge might have pushed him over the edge. And a strange emptiness. The man I'd once considered my closest friend was gone forever. But mostly, I felt nothing at all. Emma called that evening, sobbing hysterically. "Greg, did you hear about Jason? He's gone. He ruined himself." "I heard. How can you be so cold? He's gone because of what we did to him." "He's gone because he couldn't face the consequences of his actions, Emma. Just like you're running away to Boston instead of dealing with what you've done." "You destroyed him? You destroyed both of us." "No, Emma. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone could see it clearly." She hung up on me, but called back an hour later. "I want to come to the funeral," she said. "No." "What do you mean, no? I cared about him." "You cared about him so much that you helped destroy his marriage and his career. Sophie doesn't want you there, Emma. Neither do his daughters. You've caused enough pain." "You can't stop me from going to a public funeral." "Actually, I can. Sophie has requested a private service for family only. Your name is specifically not on the guest list." The funeral was held 3 days later at a small chapel outside Portland. I attended out of respect for the man Jason had once been before greed and lust had corrupted him. Sophie sat in the front row with her 2 daughters, all 3 of them dressed in black and looking devastated. The service was sparsely attended, maybe 20 people total. Jason's reputation had been so thoroughly destroyed that even his former colleagues stayed away. The pastor, who clearly hadn't known Jason well, gave a generic sermon about forgiveness and redemption. As we filed out of the chapel, Sophie approached me. "Thank you for coming, Greg." I'm sorry for your loss, Sophie. Despite everything, Jason was once a good man. Was he? Sometimes I wonder if I ever really knew him at all. I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe none of us had really known Jason Carter. Emma tried to approach me in the parking lot, having apparently ignored the family-only restriction. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Greg, please, we need to talk. There's nothing to say, Emma. Jason is gone. Doesn't that change anything? It changes nothing. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences. I'm broke, Greg. I have no money, no job, no place to live. My sister is kicking me out next week. That's not my problem. I'm Ben's mother. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy his family. I got in my car and drove away, leaving Emma standing alone in the parking lot of her late lover's funeral. That night, Ben asked me if I felt bad about Jason's passing. Yes, I told him honestly. I never wanted him to pass. I just wanted him to face consequences for what he did. Do you think Mom will try to come home now? I don't know, son. Would you want her to? Ben thought for a long moment. No, she made her choice. We don't need her anymore. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Emma contested everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. She received minimal alimony for just 2 years, no share of the business, and supervised visitation with Ben only. The judge was particularly harsh in his ruling, noting that Emma's adultery had not only destroyed the marriage, but had also involved the use of marital assets, my office building, to conduct the affair. Emma left the courthouse looking completely defeated. Her lawyer had clearly explained that she had no grounds for appeal. The settlement, while harsh, was legally sound. I never saw her again after that day. 6 months later, Mitchell Tech was thriving. Without Jason's toxic influence and Emma's constant demands on my time and attention, I was able to focus completely on growing the business. We landed 3 major new contracts and hired 8 new employees. Ben was doing well too. He'd started seeing a counselor to help process his parents' divorce, but he seemed genuinely happier without the constant tension that had filled our house during Emma's affair. His grades improved, he made new friends, and he started talking about following in my footsteps in the tech industry. Maggie had been promoted to vice president of operations, a role she'd earned through her loyalty and competence during the difficult months of my revenge campaign. She never asked for details about what had happened, but I knew she understood that justice had been served. On a Friday evening in November, exactly 1 year after Ben had first shown me those devastating photos, I was working late in my office when Maggie knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says it's important." I looked up to see a young woman in her mid-20s, professionally dressed, with determined eyes and a familiar face. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Rebecca Carter, Jason Carter's daughter." I stood up, surprised. "Rebecca, I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. May I sit down?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Rebecca had been away at graduate school during her father's downfall and passing, and I hadn't seen her at the funeral. "I wanted to thank you," she said, which was not what I'd expected. "Thank me." For exposing who my father really was, for stopping him before he could hurt more people. I studied her face, looking for signs of sarcasm or anger, but found only sincere gratitude. "I don't understand." Rebecca opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder. "After Dad passed away, Mom and I went through his things. We found evidence of other affairs, other thefts, other lies. What he did to you and your wife wasn't the first time." She spread documents across my desk. Bank records showing he'd been stealing from previous employers for years. Photos and letters from at least 3 other married women he'd been involved with. Even evidence that he'd been planning to abandon our family and disappear with your wife. I picked up one of the documents, a handwritten note from Jason to Emma discussing their plans to take several of my major clients and start their own company in another state. "He was going to leave us with nothing," Rebecca continued. "Mom, me, my sister. He was going to destroy our lives for a woman he'd known for a few months." "Rebecca, I'm sorry. I had no idea it was that extensive. That's why I'm thanking you. You stopped him. Yes, it destroyed him. But it also saved us from even worse betrayal down the road." She gathered up the documents. "Mom wanted you to know that she doesn't blame you for what happened. Dad made his choices, and he couldn't live with the consequences. That's not your fault." After Rebecca left, I sat alone in my office thinking about the past year. Jason Carter had been a sociopath, a serial cheater and thief who'd left a trail of destruction wherever he went. Emma had just been his latest victim, and his last. I thought about Emma, wherever she was now. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to Florida, working as a waitress and living in a small apartment. Ben received occasional postcards but had no desire to visit or rebuild their relationship. She'd gotten exactly what she deserved, a life as empty and meaningless as the choices she'd made. As for me, I'd learned that revenge, when properly executed, could be more satisfying than forgiveness. I'd destroyed 2 people who'd betrayed me, and I felt no guilt about it whatsoever. Some people might call that cold or cruel. I called it justice. I finished my work, turned off the lights, and drove home to my son, the only family member who'd remained loyal when it mattered most. Ben was waiting up for me, doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was your day, Dad?" "Good," I said, ruffling his hair. "Very good." Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the suburban streets in pristine white. It looked peaceful, clean, like a fresh start. Emma Mitchell had thought she could betray her husband and get away with it. Jason Carter had thought he could steal from his best friend and face no consequences. They'd both learned, too late, that Greg Mitchell wasn't the pushover they'd assumed he was. I'd gotten the last laugh after all.